We have these young lawyers that we're hiring, and you made the comment, what are they learning? Because I program the GPTs, I give them the guides or videos or articles, and the young lawyers just ask the questions into the GPT and they're off and running, or they use the GPT to do the drafting or they're off and running. So your point was, Chris, they're not learning. And that memory recall isn't firing. That executive function part of their brain is not firing. So in 3 years, Chris, are we gonna have a bunch of stupid lawyers?
Maybe. It's definitely possible.
Welcome to episode 87 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silverman Law Firm where we discuss legal news and practical law. Today is September 11th, 2025. I'm Phil Silverman, owner of the firm and your host. I'm joined by Chris Heald, who's the firm's supervising attorney and co-host. Chris, Charlie Kirk, he was a conservative Christian apologetic. I did not know who he was. I've learned who he was recently. He was assassinated on a college campus in Utah, and we were discussing a little bit about the show of whether we were going to discuss this or not. And I think you and my wife were very adamant that we should discuss it. I was of the opinion that you should not and cannot, and reasonable people knew that you can't shoot people for their opinions. And you said, no, that's not obvious. Would you care to elaborate?
I think to you and I, it's obvious. And I think to 99% of people, it's obvious. And maybe it's getting overblown because in the wake of tragedies, a lot of things get overblown. But indisputably, there are people making comments that are just inappropriate. And I think about any political person on MSNBC or any athlete who might take a stance against certain things, and how I may have a very unfavorable opinion about those people. I may turn those people off and say, oh God, I just cannot listen to that person. But nothing in my being would ever want ill to come to that person, no matter who they are, no matter what they believe. And so I think some people, unfortunately, just don't share that. But for the most part, I think they do. But there's definitely a very small minority that just can't get on board that train.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw, but we talk a lot about this show, our Google Spaces. Okay. If you know what a Google Space is, it's basically just a chat room. And we have those for our attorneys so they can share knowledge about legal topics and get assistance. And this blew up in our chat room. And I didn't really see this coming. One of the attorneys said something very benign. Okay, did everyone hear about Charlie Kirk? And then somebody said, oh, it's terrible. And another person said, I was so upset I had to leave work. And then they got into this sort of discourse where some of our more liberal leaning attorney employees felt like it shouldn't be discussed in the chat room. And then some of our more conservative attorneys were, I would say, accusing, I don't know if this is the right word, maybe accusing the liberal attorneys or the liberal side of promoting or at least being complicit in the death of Charlie Kirk. So I was, one, surprised of how divisive this is. And two, I stepped in to say, okay, now wait a minute. We can all agree that despite what this man's political opinions were, no one wants to see him killed. I think where I come down to on it is, obviously this is a conservative leaning show. That's no secret. But what's more frustrating for me is why the left and the right, or whatever we want to call them, Democrat and Republican, why we can't have healthy discourse. Okay. And there's this idea that you shouldn't talk politics at dinner. You shouldn't talk politics at parties. You shouldn't talk religion in the workplace. I actually don't feel that way. And we're a decent sized organization. If you look at the law firm and the real estate companies, I don't think the workplaces and schools operate in vacuums where we're devoid of our opinions and our politics. I don't think you need to leave your religion at the door when you walk into a school or workplace. But I do think we need to discuss it in a healthy way where we're open to discourse and we can still love each other and be friends. And that's the real dysfunction I see. Any final thoughts on that, Chris?
No, as you said, even if we do tend to maybe lean one way or the other, We don't necessarily aim to be divisive or to antagonize.
Yeah.
So I don't anyone that's the last thing we want to do, especially on this issue. There's other issues we can debate and we can antagonize and we can have healthy discourse on. Hopefully,
Yeah.
we'll just use this as an opportunity to have this discussion where we just agree on what we can agree on, and we certainly don't have to agree on.
Yeah, very tragic. 31 years old, two young children and wife who were in attendance. That's really what tore me up the most. But all right, let's talk about what's on our docket today. We are going to talk about a Texas law restricting text solicitation that took effect at the beginning of September. We all remember the do not call list. This is a text version of that, or the text amendment of that, if you will. And then in our legal question section, we're going to answer the question of somebody says, I want to sell my car to a private person. So you want to sell your car to a friend or whatever. What do I have to do in Texas? And then in our rant and rave section, this one is a special for Chris, who's not a fan of ChatGPT. And this is titled, How ChatGPT is Destroying the Web and Making Us Dumber. We will rant and rave and discuss that. So let's get it kicked off in our legal news section. And the first thing we are discussing is a Texas law, relatively new law, Senate Bill 140, took effect September 1st. It expands the definition of telephone solicitors to text messages. It basically makes it really difficult with a lot of penalties if you're a business that's using text messages to advertise. Chris, you ever get those text messages where it's, I don't know, hey, get 5 wings for $3 or something?
You know me so well, Phil. Yeah, but as you just throw everything at me and get my reactions, it's either a fraudster who's not going to follow the rule anyway, or it's something that you signed up for when you signed up for their membership card, or you signed up online and gave them your email and your phone number. Is it? Who's getting my phone number to just listen to your text?
It's just like the telemarketers for years, okay? And for years now through text messaging, they can get telephone numbers out there. I don't exactly fully understand or know how they do that. I'm sure there are services and systems that sell those numbers. And then over the years, I think the federal law, we'll talk about this, came into place. I think it was in the early 90s, where you had this do not call list and all this regulation to stop all the calls. And that's
George W. Bush's crowning achievement.
That's the regime of regulation that we have for this. But yeah, we've done these telemarketing cases. We've done several of them. Do you remember when we usually get a small business owner calling us up and he's like, hey, I've just got this lawsuit by this plaintiff's attorney, and they're saying I violated the do not call. It's really the TCPA, the Federal Telephone Protection Act. And sometimes the business owner violates it, sometimes they don't. But it's like it's a racket. There's consumers out there that are waiting to be called, and then they go run to a plaintiff's attorney. And the plaintiff's attorney, that's their main job, is suing people under the TCPA and we defend, and it's in federal court. We've defended small businesses before. Usually it's damage control because the fines are pretty well prescribed. It's essentially Senate Bill 140, Chris, is the state version of that. It's chapter 301 of the Texas Business and Commerce Code, which is effectively the Texas the Texas Telephone Protection Act. And then this year in the legislative session, we said we're now extending that to text messages. So why does this matter? Chris, what do you think?
I mean, it can't hurt, can it? Unless, I guess that kind of goes against I don't love regulation, because then you're just creating more rules for people to follow. But now that I think about it, if you go and even inquire as to refinancing your mortgage, the second you put in one piece of data, you're going to get calls and texts for weeks and weeks to come. It's going to stop people trying to sell me a new mortgage just because I wanted to see if interest rates have gone down. I'm all for it.
We have a lot of small business clients, Chris, that use text for advertising. And I had one of them say, hey, walk me through the regulation and let's get compliant, and when I took an initial look at the act, it was pretty onerous. So that's going to have a direct impact on the cost of marketing for a lot of these people. So the new law, you got to provide some opt-out provisions. You have to register with the state. There's some hefty fines. The big thing, Chris, I think this is going to be another boon for plaintiff lawyers. So if you and we're not plaintiff lawyers, Chris, but if we're looking to make a quick buck, let's fire up some advertising on this text message thing, and let's you and I, if you can't beat them, join them. Let's go start and getting some consumers that have been received a couple text messages from some companies that are out of compliance, and let's start ringing them up. There's a tie-in statute to the DTPA, which is how this works. And then we can get treble damages and we can go straight to court. So that's another angle on this thing. But
I'll pass.
okay, I think I will too. But if you're an enterprising
We'll
young
refer 'em
lawyer,
to another law firm, then.
if you're an enterprising young lawyer out there and you're looking for something to do, this may be an avenue for that. If you're a business using text messages, I recommend you do call a lawyer, get compliant. And that brings us to our legal question section because we got to move along. And here's the question. I want to sell my car to a private person. What do I have to do in Texas? Most people don't do this, Chris. Have you ever, your family, friends, you ever know anybody that sells cars privately? Most people trade them in, right?
I think you're right. I have purchased cars privately.
Okay.
I think it's one of those things, and we're real estate attorneys. We see a lot of issues with houses. I definitely always heard you don't sell cars to friends. So you do a private transaction on a car, you risk that person coming back to you saying, hey, you didn't tell me this. Whereas you go trade it in, the dealer has either checked it out or doesn't really care because they're just going to take it back to their shop. They're going to fix it up and they're going to throw it right back on the lot. So to me, that's the better deal.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of selling cars to private parties, but it does happen. This is more of a public service kind of answer because we don't, as lawyers, people don't hire us to help them sell private cars. There's just not enough juice in the squeeze for us to get involved. We have done some commercial vehicle transfers that are very similar. And as part of an asset sale for a business, Chris, you'll often see if somebody owns a plumbing company, the vehicles are titling over to the new plumbing company. And that's very similar. So that's where it really touches our practice areas. The mechanics of this are, and I don't think everybody knows this, cars have titles, okay? They're actually physical titles and they're possessory. And if when you own a car, you have the title. That's unlike real property records, which is more of like a chain of title kind of thing. You get these clients called, where's my deed? And it's like they expect there to be the fancy, it's not like that. Cars, on the other hand.
We're going to die not having won that.
Yes.
People still think that I want the deed from 1860 that's on legal paper and that's what they want.
Yeah, it's here. I think I've got a couple car titles here.
Yeah,
okay.
You just that's it. You trade that around.
Right. This is what people want, front and back. They think, where's my deed? Okay. That doesn't work for real property records. We're creating new documents, recording them in the real property records, and that's the chain of title. But for cars, on the other hand, you do have those documents. And first of all, the seller is going to sign the title. And then the buyer is going to want to check that title for liens. Liens are recorded on titles. Okay. And make sure there's no liens. You can also, if you're a buyer, you can also do a lien search on the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles site. That's another place to do it. And if there is a lien, the seller really needs to show you proof that lien is released. And then you're going to file an application for the title to be transferred. You're going to include something called an odometer disclosure statement. And that's the old joke. Remember, you ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Chris, where they take the dad's like super fancy, I don't remember what kind of, was it a Corvette? I don't remember what kind of car it was. And they put all these miles on it. And then they're so distraught at the end that they try to put it in reverse to take the miles back off. That doesn't work. Okay.
I imagine not.
No. So you have to have an odometer disclosure statement. And then this isn't mandatory, but Chris, you do get calls for bills of sale, doing a bill of sale on a vehicle. It's just a nice little document that sort of serves as a contract that's going to record the price and what you're getting. And sometimes we do those as ancillary documents when we're doing an asset transfer agreement. Sometimes we just include it in the asset transfer purchase. And then Chris,
you touched on though, that most people, even if you sign the back of the title over to somebody, you do still need to go to the DMV and get a new title. So but you're not going to have 6 different people transferring because unless it's just person to person and you're just doing it amongst family members and friends, once you get to a reputable dealer, they're not going to take your title. They're going to say, now you got to go get a new title. Then we'll buy your car from you. We're not taking this title with 6 people written on it.
Yeah, you're in the private party context, you will sign the title over, do the title application, and then if you're the seller, okay, because what happens is you're giving that title to the buyer, okay, and the buyer is supposed to go and take the title with the title application to I guess it's the DMV or the clerk or the tax office, and then pay the buyer has to pay 6.25% sales tax on that, even among private parties. Do you know that, Chris?
Yeah, that's why the bill of sale is important, and that's why sometimes people are like, "Oh, we sold it for $1." But I
Yeah,
think
what do you think about that? You recommend that, Chris? It was a $15,000 car, but we only sold it for $1,000. Do you recommend that?
I don't. There's always tax implications and stuff like that.
Well, criminal tax evasion, it's probably a felony in Texas. Let's not do that, okay?
But you mentioned lien searches. Again, the misconceptions and the parallels with real estate. We get calls all the time and people say, "Oh, I have this house." No, I don't have the house. The bank has my house. No, the bank doesn't actually own your house. Same with car. The lien holder doesn't actually own your car, but they do hold the title. So
Yeah.
when you pay off your car lien, they send you the title. Unlike a mortgage company, they don't send you your deed after you pay it off. You already had the deed 30 years ago when you bought the property. But so if someone has the title of a car, that's usually a pretty reliable indication that they own it. Because if you go get a title loan at your local title shop, they're going to take the car title too.
Yeah. And that's that's an excellent point. Texas has real property records. We're a title theory state, not a lien theory state. So we believe you own it. And then, except for vehicles, the lien holder does keep that title in Texas. And final tip, if you're a seller, 2 or 3 tips, there's a form for transfer, a notice of transfer. You as the seller do that immediately. So you're putting the public on notice that it's been transferred. That way, if that vehicle's in an accident, there's evidence that you transferred it. Take the plates off the vehicle as well. If you're a seller, the plates belong to you. Take those plates off. Take your toll tags off, your easy tag or whatever it is, take it off, okay? There's our public service, Chris. I feel like we've done good work on that, educating people on car transfers. All right, now we get to move on to our rant and rave section, my favorite part of the show. And this is titled, How ChatGPT is Destroying the Web and Making Us Dumber. This piece that we're doing, Chris, is taken off a Wall Street Journal piece with sort of a legal take on it, okay? But let me set this up for you. Not being a computer scientist or an AI guru type of guy, to me, the term artificial intelligence is really misleading. As the owner of this firm and running this organization, I use AI every day. We're implementing it in the law firm. I would actually say it's really good at summarizing our knowledge. Like when you and I do these podcasts, we just did the piece on the car vehicle, Chris. AI will take that video and put it into a blog post. So it's very good at summarizing our unique original thoughts. Or it's good at doing legal doc drafting. Chris would argue with that. Now's not the time, Chris. Let's just assume that ChatGPT is good at drafting legal documents. But I would not call that artificial intelligence. I don't feel like it has this. That's just summarizing and regurgitation. To me, that's not the same as critical thinking or what a human does. Chris, agree or disagree?
Agree. Yeah, because I think it just synthesizes, and I do think it does a good job of synthesizing, but that doesn't wow me. That doesn't make me think that it is thinking. It is not having original thoughts. I feel like any mid-level, high-level computer programmer can get to a machine and teach the machine how to compile it in a very digestible, very articulate way.
Yeah. So you and I are like-minded on that, Chris, which not typical, not usual, but okay. So we're on this issue. All right. Now, here's the large-scale problem for the web or the internet. Okay. And I'm using the term web to describe all of this information that's on the internet. AI basically summarizes everything on the web and it spits it out in an LLM text box. So whether you're doing a search on Google and you're getting the regurgitation of Gemini at the top of the search results, or whether you're on your phone using the ChatGPT app, it's effectively regurgitation of what's on the web. When you do it like that, human content creators, those are publishers and people like us that are putting content out on the web, Chris, we no longer have a great incentive to produce novel content. There's no incentive for clicks or likes or branding. Okay. So even at our firm, I've considered doing less of the publication to the internet when it's just being used by AI for free. In fact, I've even considered pay gating some of our more unique content, Chris. Now, what does that mean? The logical extreme of that is no new content, or at least much less new content, is being produced. And on one extreme, you might say that the web is being frozen in time. Okay. That if all of the creators and innovative people got together and said, we're just not going to produce any more content, the web just freezes and stops. Okay. I think that is basically what is happening or is going to happen. And we have some case studies. I don't expect you've heard this website, but maybe you impress me, Chris. Stack Overflow. You ever heard of Stack Overflow? Okay.
No.
So Stack Overflow is a Q&A site for web developers. So if you're a coder, or not just web development, any kind of development, if you're a computer programmer, what you would do is you would put a question up there about your code, and then a human would get on there and answer that, and you would have this very novel issue of a debate. Everyone stopped using it because you could just go to ChatGPT and ChatGPT would code it for you. And Stack Overflow lost 90% of the questions posted in this recent month. Okay. Why is that important? The Q&A, the human interaction, provides all the knowledge that ChatGPT is using to answer all those questions. So if the LLM, the large language model, is not getting any more novel issues and human solutions, the ChatGPT is just frozen, right? It's no longer innovative. So that's what we call, okay? That's what they call an AI world. That's what they call the model collapse. So they're worried about now the AI model collapsing because we're not getting any more human issues. Same thing with Wikipedia. A lot of the LLMs were trained on Wikipedia. Chris, do you remember when you would go to Wikipedia, search and read the stuff? No one does that anymore because you just go to ChatGPT and ChatGPT regurgitates Wikipedia.
But what you're talking about, I think you're talking about something that most people don't consider. I don't want to say they don't consider it AI, but it's like driving your car. You don't think of the mundane tasks. If someone wants to drive their Ferrari, they want to use it at top speed. When we think of AI, we think of innovating. We want to give AI a problem, whereas this just sounds like the more mundane task of, oh, now AI is being stopped from regurgitating, which almost seems like a good thing. Because then that forces you to one, learn how to research, because if we forget how to research, we're in trouble. It encourages the content creators to keep creating content. Is it as simple as just creating a username and password so that the bot can't crawl your site and pick everything up? Or
I think that's possible. So when me being the OG of search marketing, Chris, we used to have a robot text file. I think we still do. And we would tell the web crawlers like Google or Yahoo or whoever it was, whether they could crawl. And you would always want them to crawl the site because you want to be put in the search results and get traffic. Now you can tell ChatGPT not to crawl it, but it's possible that the AI, the LLMs are just going to crawl it anyway and take it. So I do think if you pay gate the content, make it subscription based, you can keep them from actually crawling and using your material. And that's what we're considering because, Chris, our organic traffic I'm just using an example. One time we spent a long time researching what was the correct amount you could enter as a credit bid in a foreclosure on a Rant transaction. Okay. And Chris is laughing because there's some history to that, but the backstory is not important, but that was a great article and a well-researched piece. And if someone wanted to know the answer, I still get attorneys that come up to me for pieces like that and all different kinds of pieces that we write. And say, oh, I saw your article. I trusted it. And what we would get is the branding. If they just read it in ChatGPT, I'm not getting anything for it. We just need to kill our writing. We don't put it out there for free.
Yeah. But think about that experience. Think about that week or two that we had when we're beginning a law firm and you're like, let's do foreclosures. And I'm like, let's not do foreclosures. And you're like, we're doing foreclosures. And we don't know anything about foreclosures. So we have to spend $300 on the manual. We have to spend all this time researching, and we had to spend all this time going back and forth and saying, no, it's this, and pulling up cases and
Yeah.
trying to find the answers. And as
Yeah.
painful as it was and as hilarious as it was, we are certainly better for going through that experience than just
Yeah.
having ChatGPT tell us the answer.
And at that time, I don't know how long ago, if that was 15 years ago, but at that time, nobody knew the answer to it. I remember asking some very high level attorneys at giant law firms that have been partners a long time, and they were all stumped. But something great came out of that piece. That was human innovation. Here's an interesting human study, and this was your point. It was a study at MIT, and it showed. And here's what they did: they took groups of people and they hooked them up with scanners. I don't know how they did. They put on their brain or put on their forehead. I don't know what they do. Okay. And there are three groups. They said one group to write an essay just using your brain. Okay. Just use your brain to write the essay. Another group had to write the essay just using the traditional search results, Google's blue links. And another group had to write the essay using AI, which would have been the easiest. You just write the prompt into ChatGPT. So they did all the scans and, what expected happened. The AI group had the least engagement across the brain regions for memory recall and executive function. So there was just nothing, very little was firing up there is the way I understand it. And that's the point of Chris. We have these young lawyers that we're hiring, and you made the comment, what are they learning? Because I program the GPTs, I give them the guides or videos or articles, and the young lawyers just ask the questions into the GPT and they're off and running, or they use the GPT to do the drafting or they're off and running. So your point was, Chris, they're not learning it. And that memory recall isn't firing. That executive function part of their brain is not firing. So in 3 years, Chris, are we going to have a bunch of stupid lawyers?
Maybe. It's definitely possible.
That's the risk. Okay. That's the risk of this.
I admit, though, I am the grumpy old man. And I do remember when I was 20 years younger now, talking about how I was about to go to law school and talking to my grandpa, who's a farmer. And he's talking about, oh, you just can't have a service-based economy. This is bad. No one's going to know how to make anything anymore. And
Right.
I feel like that guy. And at the time, I was like, I don't need to know how to make a chair. I don't need to know how to make a car,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, we've got the Chinese to do that.
Yeah, or the robots. Like someone else will do it. We don't need that. So the argument against me is, okay, Chris, you don't need that though anymore. You're a dinosaur. You're stuck in the past. So you tell me all the time, that's just not the world anymore. We don't live in that world. The person who knows how to handcraft a chair, and good for him, but his skills and his craftsmanship just aren't needed anymore.
Yeah. Here's the counterpoint real quickly. Okay. They say AI is just amazing. It's going to assist us in all these novel developments of medicine and law. It's going to help us make these great discoveries. Okay. And connections. That remains to be seen. I don't think we've seen a lot of that at this moment, but if it does, then wonderful. But we do have some real concerns about the innovation and the knowledge being lost. That's the concern. And that's what that MIT study is really delivering.
And then just relatively, as we get dumber, we'll think the AI is getting smarter.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there are some movies, I think there's some science fiction movies where, the knowledge is lost. And in some regard, that's the Dark Ages, right? That's what happens when you start talking about the ancient Greeks and the Romans having more advanced societies than we did in the Middle Ages, and all of that knowledge being lost. Maybe the height of all irony would be that AI brings us into another dark age instead of in an age of enlightenment. All right, on that philosophical note, that brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silverman. Chris has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcast. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your week and weekend.